Have you ever wondered how a woman can recall the precise color of a shirt you wore on a first date 3 years ago, while you can barely remember what you ate for lunch yesterday? That's not just a matter of attention or personality. It is the result of deeply embedded, hardwired neurological design. And to truly understand it, you have to start with something called the anticipation effect. Most people assume the greatest rush of pleasure arrives the moment we finally get what we've been waiting for: the gift, the kiss, the promotion. But in the female brain, the chemistry doesn't follow that pattern. Research consistently shows that a woman's brain tends to generate far more intense dopamine activity during the waiting period than at the moment of the actual reward. Dopamine, the neurochemical responsible for motivation and pleasure, peaks during the buildup. It peaks during the week of planning a trip, the hours spent preparing for an evening out, or even those tense minutes waiting for a phone to light up. The uncertainty itself, the maybe, carries more neurological power than the yes ever could. For women, the journey toward something isn't just a means to an end. The journey is the experience itself. This is why a well-executed surprise or a meaningful chase often lands with more emotional impact than the destination. When the buildup is absent, the reward arrives hollow. Anticipation isn't just pleasant, it is the engine that drives her entire emotional engagement with the world. Now let's talk about how reality gets constructed inside the mind. Women are statistically more vulnerable to what psychologists refer to as the illusory truth effect, and before anyone misreads that, it has absolutely nothing to do with intelligence or logic. It has everything to do with how the brain handles pattern recognition. When a specific narrative, a beauty standard, a piece of relationship advice, even a strand of toxic self-talk gets repeated enough times, the brain eventually stops interrogating it. It begins treating that repetition as established, unchallengeable fact. This isn't a design flaw. It is an ancient survival mechanism. For early humans, the ability to absorb community wisdom and read social cues quickly was the difference between belonging and being cast out. In the modern world, however, this means that the stories women encounter repeatedly, whether through media, social circles, or even a partner's words, don't just influence them. They fundamentally reshape how those women experience themselves and the world. The messages don't sit on the surface. They sink in and become part of the very bedrock of perception. The female brain is, in many ways, a biological masterpiece built for deep empathy, and at the core of that capacity are mirror neurons. These are specialized brain cells that activate not only when you perform an action, but when you simply observe someone else performing it. Everyone has them, but women tend to have significantly more active mirror neuron systems. This means that if you are sitting across from a woman while feeling stressed, anxious, or flooded with excitement, she isn't merely noticing your state. Her brain is internally recreating your emotional experience within her own nervous system. This is emotional contagion, and it's the reason women so often function as the emotional anchor in social groups. They can sense a shift in the atmosphere before a single word is spoken. But this superpower comes with a real cost. Toxic environments, chronically negative people, and high-conflict relationships are not just emotionally exhausting for women, they are physically draining. Women don't observe negativity from a safe distance. They neurologically inhabit it alongside whoever is generating it. This makes emotional environment not a luxury concern, but the single most critical factor in a woman's overall well-being. If you want to make something, whether that's an object, an opportunity, or even a person, dramatically more appealing to a woman, simply suggest that it's off limits. And this isn't a quirk or a game. It is a well-documented psychological phenomenon called psychological reactance. Think of it as an internal defense system built to guard personal freedom. The moment a woman perceives that her options are being narrowed or that someone is attempting to direct or restrict her behavior, her brain activates an intense drive to reclaim that lost autonomy. The forbidden thing suddenly becomes luminous because it represents her right to make her own choices. The historical context here matters enormously. Because women have faced more social restrictions and more doors marked with "not for you" throughout history than men, their internal resistance to having freedom taken away has become exquisitely calibrated and powerfully amplified. When that sense of restriction is triggered, it doesn't register as a minor irritation. It shifts the entire brain into high gear to restore control. This is a biological drive for self-determination, not stubbornness or defiance for its own sake. Understanding this makes one thing clear: honoring her freedom and her boundaries is not simply good manners. It is the only way to communicate without running directly into that deep-seated internal wall. Now let's settle the tired argument about why women hold on to the past or bring up old arguments. What most people read as grudge holding is actually something far more sophisticated, a biological process called emotional memory encoding. The female brain is extraordinarily effective at tagging emotionally charged experiences with powerful neurochemical markers. An ordinary moment, like what you had for breakfast on a random weekday, drifts into a temporary file and eventually disappears. But any experience wrapped in strong emotion, whether that emotion is joy, fear, or hurt, gets saved to permanent storage. A specific argument from 2 years ago or a careless comment from months back isn't being clung to out of spite. It was filed away with extraordinary clarity because, in that moment, her brain classified it as critical data. This wasn't random. It was an immense evolutionary advantage. For ancestral women navigating complex social structures, the ability to remember precisely who was trustworthy and who posed a danger was essential for keeping their communities and children safe. In modern relationships, this manifests as a highly detailed internal record of every meaningful exchange. She isn't refusing to move on. Her biology is doing exactly what it was designed to do, preserving the things that moved her. When something carries real emotional weight, the brain literally constructs a stronger, more durable physical pathway to that memory. Recognizing this reframes the whole conversation. She isn't fighting to win. She is navigating with a far more intricate map than most people ever realize. Here is a cultural myth worth dismantling. The idea that women are natural multitaskers, effortlessly managing careers, households, and social lives all at once. The scientific reality is considerably more grounding. True multitasking, processing 2 complex streams of information simultaneously, is a neurological impossibility, regardless of gender. What women genuinely excel at is something different: rapid task switching. The female brain tends to be more adept at moving from one demand to another with impressive speed and relative smoothness. She can shift from a professional email to a child's question to planning dinner in seconds, and it can look seamless from the outside. But here is the part that rarely gets discussed. Every single one of those transitions carries a cognitive cost. Each time the brain disengages from one task and loads up the rules and context for another, it burns mental energy and accumulates fatigue. The efficiency is real, but it is never free. The cultural expectation that women should simply be able to do everything at once isn't just an unfair social burden. It is a complete misunderstanding of how the human brain actually operates. Praising constant multitasking is, in truth, just applauding a high-speed drain of cognitive fuel that eventually leads to exhaustion. Shifting our perspective means understanding that it's not about doing more at the same time. It's about acknowledging the enormous mental cost of managing a world that never stops demanding the next switch. When it comes to influence and social connection, few principles are as powerful or as revealing as what's known as the foot-in-the-door technique. This isn't a manipulation strategy. It illuminates a deep biological and social drive toward consistency. From early in life, many women are conditioned to value cooperation, helpfulness, and the preservation of social harmony. When someone makes a small, almost effortless request, something so minor it feels nearly impossible to decline, it sets off a chain reaction in the brain. By agreeing to that tiny favor, a woman isn't just completing a task, she is quietly establishing a new internal identity. She begins to see herself as someone who is helpful, someone who is supportive of this person or this cause. Once that identity takes root, the dynamic shifts entirely. When a much larger, more demanding request follows, the brain generates powerful internal pressure to remain consistent with the self-image she just demonstrated. Saying no to the second request would create cognitive dissonance, an uncomfortable internal conflict between her actions and her sense of self. For women, this drive toward social consistency is a massive force. Understanding it means women can become more conscious of why they feel compelled to keep agreeing, which ultimately empowers them to draw firmer, healthier lines. For everyone else, it's a window into how small, genuine, positive interactions build the foundation for lasting trust. Nonverbal communication is a language of its own, and within female psychology, eye contact is one of its most powerful dialects. When a woman engages in meaningful, sustained eye contact, it stimulates the release of oxytocin, the neurochemical associated with bonding, trust, and warmth. That chemical signal produces a felt sense of genuine connection. It communicates, without a single word, that you see her, that you value her, and that you are fully present. Because women are generally more attuned to subtle social signals, eye contact becomes a primary instrument for assessing the sincerity and safety of any given interaction. It is one of the fastest bridges between two people. But the line between a gaze that feels intimate and one that feels threatening is extraordinarily fine, and it is entirely determined by context. The right quality of eye contact deepens a connection, while an intense, unblinking, or poorly timed stare can immediately activate a threat response. Women are acutely sensitive to this distinction. They can sense in an instant whether a gaze is one that respects their presence or one that seeks to dominate it. The same look that creates profound connection in a safe, quiet space can feel deeply invasive in an unfamiliar or crowded setting. In female psychology, the eyes don't just observe. They evaluate safety, sincerity, and intention in fractions of a second. The sunk cost fallacy is a psychological trap that tends to hit with particular force in the emotional lives of women. It is the irrational belief that we should keep investing in something that is clearly failing simply because we have already invested so much in it. Once a woman has poured her time, energy, and heart into a relationship, a career path, or a long-term commitment, her psychology creates an almost magnetic pull to keep going. Even when the situation has become toxic or plainly dead-ended, the mind starts telling a dangerous story. I can't leave now. I've already given 5 years to this. Or, walking away means everything I put into this meant nothing. That feeling of wasted investment is what traps people in cycles that stopped serving them long ago. In female psychology specifically, the weight of emotional investment often runs deeper because of the profound value placed on loyalty and connection. Leaving can feel like conceding defeat or losing a part of oneself. But the real liberation begins the moment she recognizes that sunk costs are exactly what the name says. They are already gone, and no further investment can recover them. The only thing that truly matters is the decision she makes for her future self, beginning right now. Seeing this trap clearly allows a woman to stop measuring what she has lost and to start measuring the freedom she stands to gain by releasing a broken investment. If there is one idea from everything we've explored that deserves to stay with you, it is this: emotion is the only form of currency in human connection that never loses its value, particularly within female psychology. We tend to place enormous trust in logic, in carefully constructed arguments, in the precise sequence of events. We tell ourselves that if we can just explain our position clearly enough, or if the facts are firmly on our side, that's what will matter most. But the neurological reality tells a different story. A woman may forget the exact words that were said. She may lose the thread of someone's reasoning. She may even lose track of the specific sequence of events, but she will never forget how she felt in those moments. That emotional imprint is the only element of the experience with a permanent address in her brain. This happens because emotional resonance is the primary filter the mind uses when deciding what gets committed to long-term memory. While the analytical brain is busy processing information, the limbic system, the emotional center, is determining whether this moment is worth preserving. When a moment is charged with genuine care, safety, or respect, it creates a deep neurological bookmark. When it carries thoughtlessness, dismissiveness, or a breach of trust, it creates an equally sharp and lasting marker of a different kind. The feeling doesn't simply accompany the memory. For the female brain, the feeling becomes the memory. It becomes the lens through which every future interaction gets interpreted. This changes everything about how we approach communication and connection. It means you cannot think your way out of an emotional wound. You cannot substitute presence with expensive gestures. If the emotional frequency underneath is off, the brain registers an error. But when you make the emotional experience the priority, when she consistently feels heard, safe, and valued, you are constructing something that is literally wired into her biology. How something felt becomes the roadmap for every conversation, every moment of intimacy, and the entire strength of the bond going forward. The facts fade. The feeling stays.